My name is Julie Mirpuri, and I am a physician scientist. As a doctor, I practice as a neonatologist. A neonatologist takes care of newborn babies. That's why neo. And I take care of newborn babies that are sick in the intensive care unit. So babies who are born with, some heart disease, any kind of brain abnormalities, any kind of abnormalities, really, chromosomal abnormalities, or babies who are born too early. As a scientist, I have my own laboratory and I do research on samples that we get from human babies, but I also do research with mice to be able to try and understand how to better take care of the babies that I take care of in the neonatal intensive care unit. So I've always loved medicine. I actually always wanted to become a doctor. That was like something I always wanted to do. I have a brother who has special needs. My mom had to take him to a lot of doctor's appointments when he was growing up. And so she would take him to a lot of doctor's appointments and she'd come home and she'd make a lot of comments about different kinds of doctors. And I remember her coming home from some doctors and just crying and feeling like, there was no hope. And then there was one particular doctor, and she would come home from seeing her and say, "This is such an amazing doctor." Like she would give her confidence, give her some positivity. And one day, when I think maybe I was 6 years old or something, my mom said, "You must meet this doctor." So she took me with her, with my brother, to go and see her for this visit. And I just saw this physician who was just had fantastic bedside manner, had that ability to make my mom feel like reassured, was a very good communicator. And I was like, and I could see from my mom how much hope she gave. And I was like, you know what? That was one of my first real experiences in healthcare and medicine. And I was like, this feels good. This feels right. And this is what I want to be. When you decide to become a doctor, there's so many choices, right? So there's like dermatology, radiation, oncology, hematology, oncology, cancer research, obstetrics and gynecology. And so when you're in medical school, you kind of get a taste of everything. And I got a taste of pediatrics, and I just fell in love with it. I love kids. But the other thing, I'll be very honest with you, is that, adults sometimes don't listen to you when you give them advice, right? But kids do actually, and my babies, obviously, that I take care of, we give them their medication. There's no complaint per se. So I feel like with adults, sometimes that was my struggle when I was in medical school. Like you'd say, hey, you know what, exercise more, take your medications. And the next visit, you'd see them and say, oh, I didn't take my medications. You're like, why? So that was one of the biggest things that attracted me to pediatrics. I love kids, and I felt like I could make more of a difference. The first time I remember going into a NICU, which is a neonatal intensive care unit, I was just in shock because you walk in and you see all these incubators and you look inside and they're these like tiny little human beings, and they don't, some of them don't really look like a complete human being because they're so small. And I remember the first baby I saw in an incubator was like 500 grams. And I was like, wow, this baby can survive. It wants to survive. And then, the neonatologists are doing their best to try and make this baby grow. And then a lot of them do grow well enough to go home. And I was like, wow, this would be such a satisfying field. And so I just said, this is what I want to do. This is the population of babies, kids that I want to take care of. I want to take care of these babies. I actually grew up in Hong Kong and I went to medical school there. And I had no idea you could be a doctor and a scientist and have a lab. And it was very late in my career. So I'd already decided I want to become a neonatologist. And when you become a neonatologist, you have a period of time of training called fellowship, where you get some time protected to do research. And during that time, they said, hey, why don't you join like a basic science lab? And I said, well, I've never done it before. Let's try it, And then I tried it and I just loved it. Like the idea of being able to come back from the hospital and think of ideas and be able to test them and come up with, new potential, medication or ways to treat the babies was just really exciting for me. So I didn't know I was going to do that, but then fell in love with it later in my career and invested more time. So I think I'm a good example of somebody who actually didn't follow the advice that some people gave me about what I would be best at. And I really, really stuck to what I loved. Right now, one of the most wonderful things about my job is getting to teach. So, when you're a physician scientist, you're always in a university environment because it's like a research environment. And so I get exposed to a lot of high school students, medical students, residents, fellows, and some of them join my lab. So I have like fellows who join my lab and do research with me. And I just had a fellow who actually won a couple of really big prizes, with the research he did with me. And I had a high school student who actually keeps coming every year for the summer, and she's applying to medical school now. And to be honest with you, Dad, I mean, I love the science, and I love taking care of babies, and I love when they go home, and I love when the parents are so thankful, and I love making discoveries. But I think the thing I'm most satisfied with is being able to kind of pay that forward and see young people be successful, go on in their careers, inspire them. Like, I have to say right now, that's like one of the things that really brings so much joy. One of the biggest things I'm working on right now is understanding how what mothers eat when they're pregnant can affect the baby's health in the womb. And for a long time, people didn't really think about that. They said, well, the most important things about the baby's health is moms should eat enough. They should not be like undernourished. And also they shouldn't have infections. Obviously, shouldn't have injury. But what we're trying to understand in our lab right now is how specific diet, high fat diet specifically, because we have a epidemic around the world, mostly a lot of developing countries, of obesity. And so we're studying in mice actually how having a diet which is very high in fat for the mother, or having a diet that's very high in carbohydrates for the mother, can affect the baby. And what we found is that the type of food the mother eats interacts or gets affected by the bacteria that she has. And that produces these small substances called metabolites. And these metabolites are present in the amniotic fluid, which is like the fluid that the baby is covered with. And the baby's constantly swallowing this fluid. And so these little metabolites are affecting the immune cells in the baby's intestine even before birth. So what we believe now is that what moms eat when they're pregnant is kind of preparing the baby for what they're going to be exposed to. So if they eat a bad diet, that baby's immune system is kind of primed for that. Babies who are born to mothers or parents who are obese or overweight are more likely to become obese and overweight. And babies who are born to mothers who are obese are actually more likely to have heart disease, hypertension, and all these other diseases. And so I'm very excited because we're starting to find a signal that could be important even at the time of the womb, that we can potentially change. And so I always tell young people now, or anybody who I see who's like in the pre-pregnancy age, or even, for boys, I'm like, what? People always tell pregnant women, oh, you are eating for two, you can eat whatever you want. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Eat well, eat carefully, eat the right vegetables, because your baby, even inside you, is actually using that as an example for the rest of their life. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about, because what we hope to be able to do is try and develop some of these small molecules into supplements that pregnant women can take, so that the baby after they're born has been exposed to these really good metabolites that can help them have a healthier life in the future. As a pediatrician, when I was doing pediatric training, I was just really surprised at how smart adolescents are. So, I remember that was one of my most fun rotations when you're doing adolescent medicine, because of course I went through it, but then, when you look at it from like a physician's perspective, it's just different. I think it's just such a challenging, exciting time, that age, when you're like 13 to 18, 19, you're in that kind of mid phase between kind of being still a child, but then transitioning into adulthood. It's so hard, and I think it brought back some memories, but it also kind of really gave me a lot of wow, adolescence is a very resilient time, and it's just such a challenging time. And it really gave me a lot more respect for that period of time, and I think that surprised me a little bit because I thought that I understood what being an adolescent was, but it's only when you kind of go through the spectrum and meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and you start to see some of the health conditions that they're going through. And I mean, even right now, I think it's such a different world than when I grew up. When I was an adolescent, just the internet was just kind of starting, and we didn't have Facebook and Instagram and things like that. You just compared yourself to the people who were around you in other schools. And now it's like the whole world is comparing you to everyone else. And I think that's just it was a hard time even when I was going through it, but I think it's just such a harder time. And that kind of surprised me, or maybe challenged me, made me think more about it, because it's such an evolving exposure, during that time. And I think in pediatrics, it's not my particular field, but we need more people who are doing adolescent medicine, because I think especially at this particular time with all these stresses, like that's where they need the most support. I do a lot of chemistry, ironically, when I was studying chemistry, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to use this much. And then I went through medical school, didn't use it as much. But then when I went back to research, I use chemistry all the time, where you're calculating molar fluids, doing Western blot, all sorts of things. So I do use a lot of chemistry. Biology, of course, is very important. I think math skills are still very important, like kind of being able to do calculations, especially in these little babies. We have to do such intrinsic calculations because they're so small. You have to do a lot of math, calculating how much glucose you're giving them, how much fat, and with their weight, and additives and dilution. So I think math is kind of important. And then you also have to actually use your hands a fair amount because a lot of these babies are born and they can't breathe. You have to be able to put a tube in to help them breathe with a ventilator until they can breathe on their own. Put in lines through their, babies are born with access to their veins and arteries because they're born with the umbilical cord. You've got to put lines in there when they're born to give them nutrition until they can eat. And, communication skills, being able to communicate in a team is very, very important. Medicine is, especially in the hospital, university settings, it's a team sport. So I work with a lot of great people, nurse practitioners, nurses, respiratory therapists, pharmacists. And so being able, obviously the medical students, trainees, residents, fellows. So it's really being able to work in a team is important, having those skills and being able to teach, so it's something you learn even when you're young. That we have a saying in medicine, see one, do one, teach one. If you're trying to learn something, you see somebody do it first, and you do it, and then to be a real master, then you teach it. And you can do that as early as obviously when you're in school. Yeah, those are some of I think the most important skills to have. An attitude, right? The right mindset. Don't be so hard on yourself. Sometimes you're going to fail sometimes. I mean, I failed some exams and some tests. It's going to happen. And there's many times you don't know the answers, but you can always do better, and you can always improve, and it's a learning process throughout your life. So having that right mindset of what, if I have to submit papers and apply for funding for my research. If I submit something and I don't get it, it's not a failure of me as a human being or that I'm not good enough. It's just that process, It's like, okay, let me learn from this. Let me get another one in and submit it again. And you know what? Eventually you do get it. So really having that mindset of, I can do this. I'm capable. One small failure is not a failure of me. It's just the process, So I think those are all the skills you need to really be successful, particularly in these long careers where you do have to train for a long period of time. I wake up really early in the morning, and then I head to, it's actually called Orange Theory. It's like this group workout, because I like it. I used to try and go to a gym, but I was never motivated. So I go to this group workout. You don't have to think. You go there, they tell you, do this, do that, and they play good music, and then I go home. I spend some time with my kids, get ready for work, drop them at their school, come into work. And then it depends if I'm working in the hospital or if I'm only doing my research. So I spend about 10 to 12 weeks just in the hospital. And it's chunks of time. So you take care of those babies every day. And I do a lot of teaching. So when I'm in my hospital blocks, then I go straight to the hospital. We have a meeting with all the teams to talk about the babies that we're expecting, the sickest babies. We meet with the radiologist to go through x-rays of all the babies that we need to look at. And then we start what we call rounds, where we walk around each bedside of each baby. And we talk about each baby and what plans we want to do, and we put in orders. After that, I examine all the babies, talk to the parents, and then any new babies that come in, we go see them. And then if there are babies that are delivering, I go attend those deliveries with the trainees. I love that part actually, because that's the part you like get these fresh new babies, and you help them survive. And then usually in the afternoons there's some teaching as well, teach the residents, medical students, finish up notes. And then at about 4-ish, I sign out to the incoming team who come in at night, tell them about the babies I'm taking care of. Or if I'm on call that night, then I get to sign out and I stay the night, and then I leave the next day. And then I go home to my family, spend time with my family, eat dinner, spend sometimes on my research when I'm doing that. And then that's my day. On the days that I do research, I do the same thing in the morning, but I go to my laboratory the next day. And then we plan experiments. We talk about the experiments for the day. What are the goals for the week? We have a lab meeting once a week. And then there are some days I actually do experiments still. And then some days that I'm looking at analyzing data, or I'm reading articles on specific research that I'm doing, or I'm writing papers, or I'm writing grants, which is a way to get funding for the research that we do. So it's very varied. I like it because my days don't always look the same, and it always feels challenging, but that's kind of how that is. And then when I'm on my research, there is some flexibilities. If my kids need me for some event at school, I can leave earlier to pick them up. And then I can spend a little bit more time later. So there's some harmony there that I get a little bit of flexibility. First, don't listen to people who are saying negative things. I think everybody that I know who is a successful scientist, physician, researcher, anybody in STEM field will tell you about some people along the way who said, oh, don't do that, or you won't be good at it, or you should think about this, right? And same thing happened to me. Do what you love, really follow your passion, because that'll make it worth it. That'll make you want to wake up every day. You know what? I may have been a fantastic lawyer. I might have been really good at it, but I don't think that would have been I wouldn't have woken up in the morning and felt like, yay, this is what I want to do. I might have been made good money and I might have done it really well, but do what you love, because that passion is what makes you wake up in the morning and makes you want to go to work. And so I really, really believe that the key to success is loving what you do. And so that would be the biggest advice I would give young people today. And the other thing is, having that mindset, like I said earlier, really recognizing that, your value is always there. It never changes. Even if you don't get that prize, you don't get that scholarship, you don't get something, there are other things you will get, and it doesn't change your value, and staying positive, and the biggest, most important thing to staying positive, surround yourself with positive people. Recognize those energies around you where people are negative and bringing you down, and there are people who are like, you can do this, I'm so proud of you, or let's study together, or let's do this together. Hold on to those people, because they will help lift you up.